Imagine waking up one day next to the woman you thought you understood. You've laughed with her, slept beside her, cried in front of her. You've held her when she broke down and worshipped her when she lit up. And in all that time, months, maybe years, you believed you knew who she was, what she wanted, how she loved. But then one night she says something small, a glance, a comment, a coldness, and you feel it like glass cracking beneath your feet. Suddenly it dawns on you. You never understood her desire. Not really, not beneath the surface. Not the way it pulls and recoils, not the way it blooms in shadows but withers in the spotlight. Not the way it resists logic even when it hungers with precision. She didn't want to be worshipped. She wanted to be seen and feared for it. She didn't want romance. She wanted ruin but couldn't admit it. And what if you've spent your life misreading not just her but every woman you've ever desired? This is where Sigmund Freud dared to go. Not with sentiment, not with safety, but with scalpel-sharp honesty. And what he found terrified almost everyone who read him. That female desire isn't tender, it's violent, it isn't obvious, it's encrypted, it isn't polite, it's primal. And worst of all, it's not what she thinks it is either. The theory they tried to bury Freud was obsessed with one question. What does a woman want? Not what she says she wants. Not what society permits her to want, but what lies buried beneath layers of repression, shame, culture, survival. He called it the dark continent of psychology, not because he thought women were lesser, but because the truth of female desire had been systematically erased from polite conversation, science, religion, and law. And when he finally proposed his answer, they banned it, censored it, twisted it, mocked him. Because his answer was too raw, too inconvenient, too blasphemous to the tidy myths of monogamy, morality, and modern civilization. So what was it? Freud believed that female desire wasn't about love. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about pleasure. It was about powerlessness and the dangerous seduction of surrender. He theorized that women at their psychological core didn't just want union, they wanted annihilation. To be taken, to be undone, to lose control in a world that demanded they control everything. Not always, not every time, but somewhere deep in the shadow of their psyche was a craving for the chaotic, the forbidden, the unspeakable, the desire she's not allowed to name. You won't find this version of Freud in mainstream textbooks. Not anymore, because it doesn't fit the modern narrative, because it calls out the repression that still coats female desire like perfume over blood. She is told to be empowered but not too erotic. She is told to own her body but not want too much. She is told to be equal but not wild. She is told to love but not devour. So she splits, puts her darkness into fantasy, hides it in jokes, locks it in novels, films, taboo daydreams, but never in conversation. And most men, they never see it, because they're too busy trying to please a mask, not realizing the real woman lives beneath that mask and she's starving. So what does she really want? Maybe it's not flowers and soft words, maybe it's not a checklist of emotional intelligence and masculine virtue. Maybe she wants to surrender to something she can't control. Maybe she wants to be wrecked, not harmed, but shattered open. Maybe she wants to remember she's alive in a way society doesn't allow her to feel. And maybe you've always sensed it, in the way she looks at you when she thinks you're not watching, in the way her body responds to what her words resist, in the way she tests you not because she wants you to fail, but because she wants to know if you can hold her truth without flinching. So now the question becomes, why are we so afraid to name this truth? What is it about Freud's banned theory that threatens us so deeply, both men and women? Let's go deeper, into the psychological and philosophical roots of this repression, into the architecture of shame, control, and the death of instinct. Because what you're about to discover next will change not just how you see her, but how you see desire itself. Why is female desire still so misunderstood, even by women themselves? Why do so many men feel like they're walking through a maze, trying to understand what she wants only to end up lost again? And why does a woman so often feel the need to deny, soften, or completely sever herself from her own hunger? The answer isn't found in biology alone. It lives inside repression, not just personal, but civilizational. And Freud wasn't just theorizing about sexuality. He was tracing the architecture of civilization and what it has required women to sacrifice for it to exist. The deal society made with women and their bodies. Let's go back, way back, to the roots of what Freud called the sexual suppression of the individual, before morality, before monogamy, before organized religion. In his work, Civilization and Its Discontents, Freud argued that the price of civilization was instinct. In order to build stable societies, people had to repress their animal drives. Desire had to be tamed, aggression had to be punished, sex had to be managed, and women, the bearers of erotic chaos and generational creation, had to be controlled. So we did it through religion, through marriage contracts, through purity myths, through laws written entirely by men, for men, in fear of women's bodies. And over centuries, a new version of female desire emerged, a safe, moral, docile version. One that was maternal but not feral, romantic but not ravenous, receptive but never dominant. What got buried? Everything that couldn't be named in public, everything that could unmake a man's composure and threaten society's illusion of control. Repression becomes identity. Freud's radical insight wasn't just that women had repressed desires. It was that they weren't even aware of them anymore. Most people do not really want freedom, he wrote, because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. The same goes for desire. To fully feel it in all its irrational, uncomfortable, overwhelming form is to take responsibility for it. But what happens when desire is always punished, denied, or misunderstood? You don't kill the desire. You bury it so deep it becomes unconscious. And once it goes unconscious, it begins to act out sideways. In fantasy, in passive aggression, in boredom masked as stability, in affairs justified by connection, in numb marriages where intimacy is dead but no one knows why. Freud called this the return of the repressed, when the emotions and instincts we suppress don't vanish. They return twisted, disguised, and more dangerous. Jung's warning, the shadow of the feminine. Carl Jung took Freud's idea even further. While Freud focused on repression, Jung asked, what happens to the parts of the feminine psyche that are not allowed to live openly? He called this the shadow, the unconscious storehouse of everything we deny, fear, or reject in ourselves. And for the modern woman, Jung believed the shadow was often filled with rage, erotic hunger, domination fantasies, sadistic or masochistic impulses, deep cravings for surrender or control, desires that contradict her image as a good woman. In other words, the forbidden face of the feminine. And it is in this shadow where her real desire often hides. Not the sanitized kind, not the curated version, but the raw, mythic, sometimes violent desire to be broken open not by harm but by truth, by presence, by force that doesn't exploit but penetrates the lies. This is not about abuse. This is about archetype, the wild woman, the devourer, the priestess, the lover who doesn't want safety, she wants annihilation of the false self. The false self, why modern empowerment is still a cage. Here's the paradox. We live in a time that claims to celebrate female sexuality. OnlyFans, feminist erotica, sex positivity movements, the surface looks liberated. But underneath, we're still afraid of the real thing. We still censor the dark side of desire, the side that doesn't fit the script. The side that says, I want to surrender so fully that I terrify myself. I want to dominate because I've spent my whole life being suppressed. I want to be taken, not gently, not sweetly, taken in a way that strips away the performance and leaves only the truth. These statements sound dangerous. They sound wrong, but that's because we've confused violence with depth. Desire isn't about harm, it's about truth. And the deeper that truth lives in the unconscious, the more distorted it becomes when acted out blindly. Why most men can't handle the real thing. Here's the uncomfortable truth for men. You say you want to unlock her, to awaken her, to make her submit or open. But if she really did, if she dropped the persona, if she brought you her full darkness, the chaos, the craving, the emotional power that defies logic, could you hold it? Most men can't. Because most men are also fragmented, trained to fear emotion, conditioned to seek control, uninitiated in their own shadow. So when her real desire surfaces, they shame her. They call her crazy. they silence her. Or worse, they try to dominate her from ego, not presence. And the cycle continues. The hidden problem, summarized. Freud believed female desire was intentionally buried to make civilization function. That repression led to a split psyche where women carry shame for cravings they don't fully understand. The empowered woman of today still operates inside this shadow, even if she's sexually expressive. Most men are unprepared to meet the full spectrum of feminine desire because they haven't met their own unconscious either. This is why relationships collapse. Not because people don't love each other, but because neither partner has the courage or the tools to meet the truth beneath desire. So now we ask, what are the consequences of continuing to live like this? Of keeping the erotic unconscious buried, half expressed, half feared? Let's go there, to the unseen consequences in love, in society, in the self. Because the cost of repression is always higher than we think. You don't notice the cost at first, because it doesn't arrive in a scream. It arrives in a sigh, in the quiet withdrawal from touch, in the way she stops meeting your eyes, in the way your body starts going through the motions, but your soul doesn't follow. This is how the unconscious makes itself known, not through drama, but through disconnection. The repression Freud spoke of wasn't just historical, it's present, it's everywhere. And its consequences, they're not just psychological, they're existential. 1. Dead bedrooms, living fantasies. Let's start with the obvious. So many relationships begin with fire and end in familiarity. Desire disappears, not because people stop loving each other, but because they never really knew what desire was to begin with. They confuse desire with chemistry, with novelty, with validation. But real desire? It's dangerous. It involves risk, power, surrender, and the deep, uncomfortable vulnerability of being known. When female desire is repressed, even subtly, what replaces it is performance. She gives what she's learned to give. Affection, enthusiasm with limits. She moans, but it's measured. She touches, but it's technical. She's in it, but she's also watching herself from outside. Meanwhile, her real longing, it goes somewhere else, into fantasy, into fiction, into the parts of her mind and body she never speaks aloud. And the man beside her wonders, why does she pull away when I try to connect? Why does it feel like she's giving me something, but I don't really have her? Because you don't. You have her mask, her persona, not the fire beneath it. 2. Emotional muting. A culture of half-felt lives. Repressed desire doesn't just kill eroticism, it kills aliveness. When a woman can't express her full sensual, wild, intuitive, chaotic nature, she becomes emotionally muted. She doesn't laugh as hard, she doesn't cry as deeply, she doesn't feel like she used to. Instead, she becomes fine, functional, resilient. But underneath that functional exterior is a storm of unmet longing, not just for sex, but for release, of control, of politeness, of the role she's been forced to play her entire life. And it's not just her. Men feel it too. They sense the absence, the subtle deadening, the performance beneath the pleasure. But they don't know what to do with it, so they turn away, withdraw, or push harder, which only makes her shut down more, and so the cycle continues. 3. The rise of confused men and the fear of the real feminine. Here's something most men won't say aloud. I want her to be free, but not too much. I want her to be wild, but still mine. I want her to open, but only in ways I understand. Because let's be honest, the full expression of feminine desire is terrifying, not because it's dangerous, but because it's unpredictable. It doesn't follow logic. It doesn't always align with words. It doesn't care about your checklist of what healthy sexuality should look like. And so when it shows up, raw, demanding, fluid, dark, many men flinch. They shrink. They pathologize. They moralize. They say, she's too much. She's crazy. She's unstable. But what they're really saying is, I was never taught how to hold her. And so, women learn to hide again, to become smaller, more manageable, more spiritual, less real. 4. Trauma loops and compulsive relationships. When desire is repressed in one generation, it's inherited by the next. This is what Freud warned us about. The unconscious doesn't vanish, it replicates. So what happens? You get people, men and women, locked in loops. The nice guy chasing the chaotic woman, the powerful woman choosing unavailable men, the over-functioning partner addicted to emotional caretaking. These aren't personality types. They're symptoms. Symptoms of unresolved, unintegrated desire that's been twisted, rerouted, and buried so deeply it can only resurface through compulsion. Not choice, not alignment, just raw, unconscious repetition. Because the psyche will do whatever it takes to be seen, even if it has to sabotage your life to get your attention. 5. Societal collapse of erotic intelligence. At scale, the repression of feminine desire leads to something more devastating than personal disappointment. It creates a culture of erotic illiteracy, a world where porn becomes the primary sex educator. Romantic comedies define what love should look like. Women are told to be sexy but not sexual. Men are told to be dominant but not intimate. Everyone is performing, spoma. No one is connecting. And in this world, we confuse stimulation with intimacy, fantasy with truth, control with chemistry. We forget what it means to feel each other, to dissolve into mystery, to dance between dominance and surrender, not as roles, but as archetypal energies moving through honest, present human beings. Instead, we trade that mystery for compatibility. We reduce desire to algorithms. We analyze love like spreadsheets, and then we wonder why we're empty. The soul goes starving, but perhaps the deepest consequence of all is this. When desire is repressed, the soul starves. Because desire, not lust, not ego, but true archetypal desire is a portal to transformation, to union, to transcendence. Freud, for all his controversy, understood this. He saw sexuality not just as a drive, but as a symbolic code, a key to unlock the unconscious. So when we keep repressing it, or sanitizing it, or performing it, or managing it, we lose access to something sacred, not just between lovers, but within ourselves. Now ask yourself, how long can you live like this? How many partners will you lose trying to find what was never allowed to live in either of you? How many years will you spend circling the edge of connection, never daring to drop into the depths because no one gave you permission to go there? What if you didn't wait for permission? What if you rebelled? What if you reclaimed the forbidden truth of feminine desire, not to exploit it, not to fear it, but to meet it? Fully? Let's go there. To the next stage. The rebellion. How to break free. There comes a moment when silence becomes betrayal. Not betrayal of others, but of your own soul, of your instincts, of the parts of you, male or female, that are screaming to be heard beneath the armor of politeness, performance, and repression. The rebellion begins the moment you stop asking, "What should I want?" and instead ask, "What has been stolen from my wanting?" This is not a rebellion against love. It's a rebellion for love. Love that doesn't require masks, filters, or psychological gymnastics. Love that includes desire, that makes room for contradiction, that says, you can want wildly and still be whole. Step 1. Reclaiming the erotic as sacred, not sinful. The first act of rebellion is inner. It's the decision to unlearn everything you've been told about desire. That it's dirty, that it's dangerous, that it must be controlled, managed, suppressed. These are not moral lessons. They are cultural weapons. Weapons designed to tame the erotic until it's predictable, until it fits inside bedtime routines, monogamy contracts, and 5-step intimacy guides. But real desire does not fit. Because the erotic is not just about sex, it is the force of life itself. Audre Lorde, a black feminist and poet, once wrote, "The erotic is a measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings." In other words, the erotic is where we touch the edge of what we can become, and to treat it as shameful is to exile the very soul of transformation. So if you're going to rebel truly, you must treat desire not as temptation but as revelation. Step 2. Shadow work is not optional. Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This applies tenfold to erotic energy. If you don't explore your repressed desires, they won't disappear. They'll take over, secretly, sabotaging your relationships, pulling you into compulsions, making you crave things you don't understand, then feel shame for craving them. Shadow work is not some new age hobby, it's survival. For women, it means making space for the parts of themselves they've been taught to reject. The part that wants to dominate, the part that wants to surrender completely, the part that loves deeply and still craves danger, the part that doesn't want to be good but true. For men, it means facing their fear of the wild feminine, not to conquer her but to become strong enough to hold her truth, because unless both genders do their shadow work, they will never meet. They'll only perform for each other, then resent each other when the performance collapses. Step 3. Deconstruct the scripts you didn't consent to. Society gave you a script. You never signed up for it, but you've been performing it for years. Women were told, be desirable, but don't desire too much. Be sexy, but not threatening. Be open, but not chaotic. Men were told, be strong, but never soft. Lead, but never lose control. Desire her, but never need her. These scripts don't lead to connection, they lead to confusion, misreading, performative attraction, fake orgasms, real disappointment. The rebellion means burning the script and writing your own, even if it offends, even if no one applauds, even if it leaves you temporarily alone, because truth is lonely before it sets you free. Step 4. Practice erotic truth-telling, even if it scares you. What if instead of asking will this make me lovable, you asked, is this my truth? What if erotic truth wasn't about kink or fantasy, but about emotional honesty? Imagine saying things like, sometimes I want to be held so tightly I forget where I end and you begin. There's a part of me that wants to surrender, not because I'm weak, but because I'm tired of being in control. There's something dark I've never told anyone, because I thought it made me unlovable. These aren't confessions, they're invitations to stop being mirrors for each other's personas and start becoming witnesses to each other's souls. Yes, it will feel risky. Yes, some people won't stay, but the ones who do, you will never need to perform for again. Step 5. Redefine power as integration, not domination. In our fear of desire, we've made power a dirty word. But repression creates perversion, and perversion always seeks domination. True power is not about control. It's about containment. The ability to hold what is overwhelming without suppressing it. A man who has done his inner work doesn't shrink from a woman's erotic fire, he welcomes it. Not as something to tame, but as something sacred to dance with. A woman who has reclaimed her shadow no longer performs her desire, she embodies it. Without shame, without apology, without asking permission. These are the people who know how to love deeply and want wildly without losing themselves in the process. This is not just personal, it's revolutionary. When one person reclaims their full erotic self, it does something more than just transform their relationship. It sends a signal to others, to the culture, to the collective unconscious. There is another way. We don't have to live numb. We don't have to lie about what we want. We don't have to fear desire. We can become whole. Freud's band theory isn't about scandal. It's about awakening to the truths we were never supposed to name, to the parts of ourselves that were locked away, not because they were wrong, but because they were too powerful for a world built on control. And now that you've seen the truth, there's no going back, because now you know what's possible. Not perfect love, but real love, messy, erotic, honest, alive. So now the final question remains. What happens when you live from that place, when you no longer seek to control your desire, but to understand it, to integrate it, to become one with it? Let's go to the final chapter, the deepest insight of all, the ultimate truth. Imagine this. You stand before a mirror, but it's not your face you see reflected. It's everything you were never allowed to be, the part of you that wanted more than safety, the hunger you swallowed before speaking, the eyes you averted, the yes you said when you meant no, the no you buried because desire felt dangerous. And in that moment, the truth hits you not as a whisper, but as a thunderclap. Desire was never the enemy. It was the teacher. The lie we were all taught. We were raised to believe that to be desirable is to be valuable. That what makes a woman worthy is how many people want her. And what makes a man powerful is how many women he can have. But no one asked, what do you want? And more importantly, why? We don't ask because the answers are uncomfortable, because they peel away the social masks and reveal something older, deeper, rawer, something ancient, pre-verbal, pre-moral. The truth? You're not attracted to someone because they're hot, or nice, or compatible. You're attracted because they mirror something unfinished in you, something you long to integrate, something your unconscious recognizes not as pleasure but as initiation. Desire as mirror, not magnet. Freud knew this, that the object of our desire is often just that, an object, a projection, a stand-in for something we've lost, denied, or never fully understood. The woman who longs to be consumed doesn't just want pleasure. She wants transformation, to disappear into someone who can witness her fully, not tame her, witness her, hold her without flinching. The man who chases the chaotic, mysterious woman isn't looking for chaos. He's looking for his own buried mystery, the part of him that was never allowed to feel, to tremble, to be undone. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with possibilities we see in them. And desire, it is the flashlight that shows us where our soul still aches to be whole. The feminine doesn't want control. She wants presence. Here's the paradox no one dares say aloud. What the feminine really craves is not dominance or submission or even love. It's presence. The kind of presence that doesn't run from intensity, that doesn't need to label, fix, or manage what arises. The kind of presence that says, bring me all of you, even the parts you think I'll leave you for, especially those. When that presence meets true feminine desire, a desire that is not polite, not choreographed, not Instagram ready, something alchemical happens. Not sex, not romance, transcendence, a spiritual eruption, where shame evaporates, where the soul remembers itself, where you realize that desire is not a problem to be solved, but a prayer answered in flesh. Eros is evolution. The Greeks had a word for this. Eros, not just sexual attraction, but the life force itself, the longing that drives creativity, connection, consciousness. Freud tried to reduce Eros to libido, but even he knew deep down that libido was more than sex. It was the spark of the divine clothed in human skin. The forbidden truth is Eros evolves you. It shows you your edges. It breaks the ego. It teaches surrender, not to another person, but to the truth of who you are beneath the lies. That's why your deepest attractions feel like chaos, because they're not designed to make you happy. They're designed to wake you up. The final realization: the battle was never with desire. We spent centuries trying to conquer desire, label it, domesticate it, moralize it, hide it in bedrooms, behind curtains, in poetry, in shame. But the battle was never with desire, it was always with fear. Fear of losing control, fear of not being enough, fear of being seen fully and left anyway, fear of the power that erupts when we stop pretending. Desire doesn't destroy us, fear does. Fear turns sex into performance, love into transaction, life into survival. But desire turns walls into doors, turns masks into ashes, turns pain into portal. The sacred feminine doesn't want to be worshipped. She wants to be understood. So what does she want? This dangerous, repressed, powerful thing called feminine desire. She wants to be understood, not decoded, not categorized, felt, trusted, given space to burn down the illusion that women must be small to be safe. And when she is, when a woman reclaims her own darkness, her own hunger, her own divine chaos, she becomes unignorable, not loud, true. And the man who meets her there, he becomes initiated, not by her body, but by the mirror of himself that she reflects back to him. No longer the tamer, but the witness, the container, the equal, a new kind of union. This is the future no one talks about. Not couples who are working on communication, not sex tips or date night rituals, but erotic wholeness, where two people come together not to complete each other, but to reflect each other's missing pieces, where desire isn't outsourced to porn or fantasy, but lived honestly, messily, sacredly, where love doesn't mean safety, it means truth, the truth of your longing, the truth of your shadow, the truth of your light, and the willingness to see it all in another. So what now? Now that you know that female desire was never broken, only buried, what will you do? Now that you understand that desire is not a threat to love, but its furnace, how will you show up? Will you keep pretending? Keep performing? Keep fearing what you've been aching for all along? Or will you strip it all away, the shame, the role, the silence, and whisper, I want to want without apology, and I want to meet you there where you are most real? Because in the end, that's all desire ever asked of you. To stop lying, to stop hiding, to stop running from your own soul in the name of fitting in. This was never about sex. This was always about freedom.